Hey everyone, thank you for your time today. The purpose of me being here is to really give you an understanding of what's happening at the regional level. At the regional government, we help coordinate all the counties within the MPO. An MPO is a metropolitan planning organization, and we help bring all the counties together in the region. 8 in total right now with East West Gateway. We bring all the counties together to discuss transportation issues. So recently, we came up with this Gateway to Safer Roads plan. It's a safety action plan. Next slide, please. Okay, great. So East West Gateway received some funding for this plan through the first round of Safe Streets and Roads for All grant, or in the planning world, it's known as SS4A. We got this in 2022, and in the first round, in round one, SS4A applicants could apply for funding to develop comprehensive safety action plans or implementation products. But one caveat is that you could not apply or even receive any implementation funding or funding for projects unless you had one of these plans in place. And the plan that was in place had to meet the US DOT, their requirements. US DOT is the US Department of Transportation. At the time of applying, only one county already had a plan and one city had a plan. That was Kirkwood and St. Charles County. So East West Gateway just thought it was best that we all come up with this plan together to position all the counties to be able to apply for this funding in the future. So to give you a little bit more details about who East West Gateway is, we are a bi-state MPO, Metropolitan Planning Organization. We have 5 counties in Missouri and 3 in Illinois, and we have just under 200 municipalities. It's a lot of us, y'all. It's a lot, and that explains why it takes some time to get some things done, okay? So keep that in your mind. With so many municipalities in the region, we felt it was appropriate, again, to take the lead and create this regional safety action plan instead of putting everybody in position to apply for their own grant, and we all risk not getting the funding to do the work that we need to do. Next slide, please. So we found out that we were awarded funding in January 2023, and we signed all of our agreements in that July. And so we immediately went out to bid. This was a very, very, very quick process. We completed the RFP, the request for proposals process, and selected a consultant, and then kicked off the project immediately in Thanksgiving in 2023. Our deadline was to have the plan completed and approved by the board of directors at the June 2024 meeting, and they gave us roughly 7 months to come up with a plan. So once we got that approval, we was all in, heads down. Next slide, please. Going back to the funding, why we even applied for this in the first place. Roadway crashes are the leading cause for death for ages 8 to 20 years old, and for just young adults, and the second leading cause of death from unintentional injuries in the US. And when we compare the St. Louis region to other regions, our peer regions, and fatal crashes per 100,000 vehicle miles, St. Louis, we always rank one of the highest. We're always above the peer average. And unfortunately, I'm not sure if you can see the graph. Unfortunately, we're trending in the wrong direction every single year. It's just getting worse and worse. So it was very critical that we come up with this plan. If you need to hear some numbers, from 2018 to 2022, our region had 9,576 fatal and serious injury crashes. And like I said, it keeps getting worse. Next slide, please. For our action plan, we reviewed the best practices that were happening across the nation. We engaged with some of our local stakeholders throughout multiple groups and task force. We also completed a safety analysis on crash data for the whole region. All of this together makes up a well-rounded safety action plan for the region. We had a consulting group called Equitable Cities, which is a group out of New Jersey, Black-owned, I would like to note. They helped us make sure that equity was woven all the way through the process. That's their specialty, equity first. FHWA's safe system approach is the base that we built this plan around. So if you want to look that up, you can go to highways.dot.gov/safety, or just Google FHWA safe systems approach. But this approach is looking at safer people, vehicles, speeds, roads, and post crash care. We want to create layers of redundancy so that we have multiple layers of safety. So if you look at this Swiss cheese model down here, it shows how if multiple or a couple layers fail, you still have some other layers that protect people involved in the crash. So, for example, you have a driver that's speeding, they fall asleep while they're driving. But if you look at the road design, the road that he's on, driving on, has rumble strips that wakes him up as he's veering off the road. So in this situation, two of the safe system layers, they failed, which is him not driving safe, him speeding, him falling asleep. Those failed, but the third layer protected the driver and helped him avoid the crash, the rumble strips. I don't know how many of y'all have fell asleep on the highway by accident and heard that. That's a rumble strip. The safe systems approach is something that we have noticed that our local engineers are trying to figure out. If you know engineers, it's very, very textbook. It's hard to come out of that book sometimes. But the safe system approach teaches you to be much more comprehensive and think about things outside of what that book is talking about. So we're partnering with all these other agencies outside of transportation to make sure that our region is safer. Next slide, please. So the three main components of our action plans were engagement, safety analysis, and policy review. Next slide. We're going to start with engagement. As I mentioned earlier, there were 5 stakeholder groups that made up of local stakeholders throughout each county, and there was a regional task force. So each of our counties, they're all built different. Not all of them are urban. A lot of them are rural. So some of the issues that the city may be facing is not going to be the same issues that the rural counties are facing, like Jefferson County or Franklin County. And with that said, our consultant CBB suggested that we have separate groups so that we can make sure all issues are addressed and we can all come together and understand what all the issues are. These groups met 3 times. They met to educate them on the processes and best practices that's been used throughout the nation, i.e. the safe systems approach, complete streets. I know we've been talking a lot about complete streets. So even though we're all in transportation, not everyone is familiar with how complete streets work. It's still a very brand new concept. Then we all presented our draft of the high injury networks. We brainstormed some recommendations and we did a draft plan with proposed project locations. These groups helped us get the perspective from local municipalities and counties, as well as local advocacy groups who may have not always had a seat at the transportation table. Having the engagement of the stakeholder groups and regional task force helped us create the momentum that we need to create a full culture change, not just a policy change, but a culture change, and start fostering some ideas behind some of these safety projects. So on this slide, I'm just showing who was a part of the regional task force. This group is a little different than our county stakeholder groups, but we wanted to focus on all 5 elements of the safe system approach. So we have representatives from all different backgrounds, including law enforcement, ambulance services, engineers, planners, local advocacy groups, transit groups, equity focused, and more. And we intend on keeping that same kind of capacity going forward. Now, I do want to note that Transform 314 was one of those groups, but like I said, the process went so fast. Not everyone had a chance to really be fully involved in the process, okay? I'm not sure if Kelly wanted to talk on that later, but I do want to put that out there. There ain't no shade, just let you know this process went very, very fast. Next slide, please. Next up, we're going to talk about the safety analysis. Next. So one of the main components of the plan is the creation of this high injury network, or if you see HIN, that's the high injury network. These are a series of maps that shows us where the most fatal and serious injury crashes are occurring. And we have 5 of those that we include. You got the all modes. So this is all the roads in our region except for the interstates, vulnerable road users, which are elderly, children, even people on the side of the road. Sometimes you see trucks on the side of the road, or you might got a flat, you get out the car, you're a vulnerable road user. And including bicyclists and pedestrians, underserved communities, top contributing factors of crashes and interstate hotspots. We also created high injury networks for each of our counties, so they'll be able to focus on like what needs to focus. They can direct their attention on what needs to be focused on per county instead of focusing on the whole region. And as you can see on the map, it's kind of blurry. You ain't gonna be able to see that, but we can send the slides out. But if you can see it, most of the high injury network is right at the top of St. Louis and into St. Louis, a little bit into St. Louis County. Yeah, it's mostly just around the urban core. And so some of our more rural counties, they didn't really show up on the injury networks, which is a good thing, that they don't have a lot of fatal and serious injuries, but we wanted to make sure that with this plan, they could still get something out of it. I'm not sure if y'all been through Franklin County before, Jefferson County, but it gets dark. That's not some place you want to be walking. So we want to make sure they have what they need as well. Next slide, please. So this map, again, it's a little hard to see, but this is our regional all modes high injury network. When you get the slides, you will see some lines that are in red, and these are our top 10% of our fatal and serious injury crashes that are happening in the region. The orange is a top 25%, and the yellow is a top 50%. And you can see that the highest concentration, again, is in North St. Louis, the urban core, the city of St. Louis. We did put this and all the other regional high injury networks on our website. So if you want to take a look at this outside of the presentation, you can just Google East West Gateway high injury network and it'll show up there. Next slide, please. We did dive a little bit deeper into the crash data, and we looked at some systemic treatments that our local roads could deploy on our systems to reduce fatal and serious injury crashes. We identified high-risk roadway characteristics and what countermeasures could be used to lower those risks. We focused a lot on the intersections, like roadway departures, vulnerable road users, and even just speed management. And a lot of those countermeasures that we did suggest, they're already on the FHWA's website. And it's part of their suggested countermeasures, safety countermeasures list. But going back to our county level stakeholders, it was important for us to share this information with each county so that they could understand the issues happening on their specific roadways and why we might suggest specific roadways. Y'all, if y'all hear some of them conversations, it get crazy. But by talking with the stakeholders, we also learned what measures they could use as an agency and what countermeasures they likely can't or won't use. And this really gave us a chance to learn more about challenges that our locals are facing, whether they be political, financial, or even just policy driven. It just put everything into perspective. Next slide, please. The last component of the plan is the policy review. Next slide. We identified 9 policy and programming needs and opportunities for our region. These are listed in no particular order, but they include speeding, seatbelt use, helmet use, distracted driving, impairment, red light running, bike and ped safety, unlicensed drivers, and roadway departures. Yeah, it's a little hard to see, but next slide. To help address those 9 opportunities and needs, we came up with 16 different policies and programming recommendations, and we divided those into 4 more categories. So safe road users, safe vehicles, safe roads, and enforcement. And you can see on the slide, well, you can see all the recommendations here, but once again, it was important for us to discuss all of these with all of our stakeholders because again, they represent all the different facets of things that exist within our region, law enforcement, everything that I named before, engineers, ambulances, everything, equity, all of it. We wanted to make sure that we went through all of this with them because they are going to be the ones who are implementing this. So we need to make sure as we're implementing these policies that they're all on board. Next slide. And this is just the same 16 policies, but in a map so that you can see multiple of these policies actually check off a lot of the boxes in one. Like just one thing could check off a lot of the boxes. Yes, there are some of them that only check off 1 or maybe 2 boxes, but if you go back to that Swiss cheese model, you can't rely on one policy or program to solve all the issues. You have to layer all of these approaches. Next slide. We did want to make sure that we address the great work that is already being done in our region and try to build on those. One thing that we did want to call out is how a few of our municipalities have already been successful in being awarded the SS4A funding. So the city of Kirkwood already had an action plan and they're already currently doing some of the supplemental work now. The city of Webster Groves and East St. Louis are doing some demonstration projects, or they're developing their action plan. And one of the projects I'm working on now is with the city of Alton in Illinois. They're applying for the August deadline to do some implementation funding for a demonstration project. Next slide. Now, through all of this work, we did have a pretty lofty goal. The proposed goal was to reduce roadway crash fatalities and serious injuries by 50% by 2050, with a commitment to ultimately eliminating roadway deaths. So I know we talked about Vision Zero in here before. This is essentially Vision Zero without saying Vision Zero, because Vision Zero makes some people itch. Okay, so reduce roadway fatalities by 50% by 2050. We did decide to set this aggressive and achievable goal, but we got plans. We got some ideas on how we wanted to do that. Next slide. We planned to reach this reduction through addressing the main components I just talked about. So the high injury network, systemic treatments, policy, and programming. Again, the Swiss cheese approach. We got to layer some things to make this happen, this aggressive goal happen. Next slide. So to come up with the 50 by 50 goal, we wanted to make sure that there was real math behind it and that it was truly achievable. So if you look at this chart, you will see the three components of our plan broken out. We are showing that if the region can address 95% of the top 10 and 25% of the region's high injury network, we can reduce 30% of the fatal and serious injuries. So that's step one. Then if we implement 50% of the suggested systemic treatments, we can reduce it again by another 10%. And then finally, if we implement 50% of the suggested policies and programs, then we got another 10% off. So all of this should help us hit 50% by 2050. All right, next slide. This shows us how we can achieve those goals and deadlines we need to meet. One thing that will help us achieve this 50 by 50 goal is that many projects on the 5% list is already programmed, and several counties are already considering planning and programming grant applications as well as implementation. I know a lot of municipalities have applied or are in the process of applying for the August deadline for the SS4A grant now. So people are doing the work. Like I said, the plan has put people in position to really get a lot of these implementation funds. Next slide. So before I close out, I did want to end with some lessons learned or some things that were confirmed during our process. One, keep local stakeholders involved throughout the entire process. Our team feel like they did a pretty good job. Overall, we think we counted presenting to our local committees and boards over 20 times in the 7-month process, but this did not include our stakeholder meetings. One other thing we did was hosted a SS4A how-to workshop for anyone who was interested in the region, and this helped us get the word out about our plan, as well as being another chance to educate the community in the region on what roadway safety is and how we can achieve that. Next, listen. Our stakeholder meetings were really about us presenting data and information and then listening to what they had to say. And this helped us shape our plan to make sure it met the needs of everyone from the rural and urban municipalities. Our team said they believe that this helped us gain the trust of our stakeholders. Because we listened to what they had to say and acted on it, they feel they are just as much owners of this plan as we are. And I have seen that too. Everyone really seems to be on board and really taking this serious and consulting each other within the region and some of our peer regions on like how to do this effectively and sustainably. Understanding that everyone has their own agenda and that we're in charge of finding the common ground. That has been the biggest one. Like I said, it's 8 counties in the region and 200 municipalities, and everybody wants to do their own thing. But having a plan like this puts us all under one umbrella and helps us really work towards the same goal and have the same objectives, ideas, plans to implement these things at the same time or even at different times. And the last thing that we learned was to make your goal realistic and achievable. We started talking about our goal with the stakeholder groups in the first meeting, and what we heard was that they preferred setting an intermediate goal instead of going straight to zero. Which again, I told y'all, this vision zero makes some people itch, and I get it. It is very aggressive. It's very aggressive. So having incremental and intermediate goals in the process definitely made everybody much more comfortable and confident that we can achieve safer roads throughout the region. Um, Next slide. That is really it. This slide has the contact information for everyone who worked on this plan. If you do have questions, I can probably answer some. I wasn't directly involved with this plan, but I do help with some of the implementation of demonstration projects and pilot projects, so I may be able to answer some things. But again, this is very high level. This is the money that the region is positioning each of the municipalities to be able to receive so that we can have more complete streets, we can have safer roads. We're all working together to be outside. You know, we want to be safe outside. Any questions? No problem, no problem. Mm-hmm. It is. The question is whether the high injury network is broken down per county, and if we could see it probably by city as well. Yes, you can. We have it on the East West Gateway website. You could break it down from the regional view all the way down to the county and I think the city level. So you can see exactly where the main problem streets are. Yes. Yeah, I believe they're in this book. So there's some up there if you want to take it. You could take this one. You can take this. Mhm. And if anybody wants a copy of the plan, it is on the table over there. Take it, please. Yes. Mhm. It is one of the most used best practices. It can be very safe, but it's one of those things that you can't just put that in and expect people to solve all the issues. You have to kind of layer that. You have to reduce the speeds. You have to change the infrastructure that makes speeding less of a thing. You know, you have to kind of build on that Swiss cheese model. And Charles worked on it a lot too. So if Charles wants to talk about it, you could talk about it. No? Okay, cool. Any other questions? So, of course, they have the countermeasures and ideas of things that they can do as far as implementing safety, but they also have access to a lot of data that they've already been using. Scott will talk about it more with the traffic calming guys. They've already been addressing some of the high injury network. They already had their own reports on that. So, this plan is just positioning them to be able to access some federal dollars to do those projects. Did I cover it, Scott? Okay, cool. Any other questions? All right, we are about to zoom in locally now.